back to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers trial. Eric and Lyle Menendez on trial for the homicides of their parents, Kitty and Jose, who maltreated them their entire lives, and basically they acted out of fear. That is their narrative. The state's narrative is they're just a bunch of rich kids that wanted money, which makes no sense because their dad made the money, so why would they shoot the person that made the money? I never understood that theory. But that is where we are. We are actually on the state's case, what are we? 29. Defense's case, part 29. And we are reading through the testimony of Dr. Charles Morton. Will we'll be reading through him today and then complete him tomorrow. And then Leslie Gaskell from the boating company or whatever, she's going to be also in tomorrow's episode. So today is not the conclusion of Dr. Morton, but almost. So let's get started. Um, all right, let me shrink myself. Please hit the like button if you haven't already. And the judge says, all right, we'll have the jury out, please. The jury enters the courtroom and the following proceedings are held. The court says, the jury is in. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're waiting for one juror. Let the record reflect all counsel and the defendant are here. And we're now ready to resume with the testimony of the witness who was on the stand. Would you resume the stand, please? Charles V. Morton, the witness from the stand at the evening of adjournment, having been sworn, testified as follows. The court says, would you state your name again? He says, yes. Charles V. Morton, he spells it. The court says, all right, you're still under oath. And then the court says, you may continue your cross-examination. So Mr. Khan, for the state, will be doing continuing his cross-examination of the witness. Mr. Morton, I believe you testified in your direct examination that you were appointed by the court. Is that correct? I'm not sure I was appointed by the court. Did I testify to that? I believe so. I believe the appointment, my relation with Mrs. Abramson I was hired by her. I'm not sure of the arrangements. You weren't suggesting by your testimony that you were appointed by the court, that you were selected by the court. Is that correct? Not at all. What you are saying is that you're simply being paid by the court. Is that correct? That's my understanding, yes. So he wasn't appointed by the court. He's being reimbursed by the court because the brothers are indigent in this case. The first case, they had some money left, and basically all their money went to that case and got tied up in like other legal things. But for the most part, first case, they ended up broke. First trial, I should say. And now, second trial, they had to file as indigent, meaning they don't have money. And the state pays for their defense attorneys and their experts. That's basically what happens. That's total normal par for the course. And you've been in court watching testimony of witnesses who have been testifying for how many days now? About 4 or 5 days, I guess. And what is the purpose of staying in court and listening to the testimony of witnesses? Basically, waiting to testify. Not for the purpose of hearing what they have to say? Not particularly, no. And how much are you being paid for your services? My normal rate is $180 an hour. I was told that could not be paid in this case at this point, and I accepted a rate of $100 an hour, but I also understand that there was a limit of about $3,700 on the case, so I'm not sure. Yesterday, you offered a reconstruction concerning the sequence of shots and the position of Jose Menendez at the time that he was shot. Do you recall that? I think I don't try to do complete reconstructions. I think those are hazardous because there are a lot of variables. When you look at a shooting, that involves a large number of shots, the possible arrangements of the shots can be in the thousands. And in fact, if you're talking about 8 shots, probably 40,000, and 10 shots would be in the millions. So, okay, why do we have that in the middle of our testimony? That might be an error. I don't know. Appearances. What the heck? Testimony started and then we got like a cover sheet information. Okay. Anyways, may I finish my answer, please? Yes, go ahead. Do you see this? And we've got more of these cover sheets. Appearances by Gil Garcetti, and well, although I don't think Gil Garcetti ever made it into the courtroom, or did he? But he never. Oh my gosh, now we've got exhibits. What the heck is going on? Okay, whew, here's his answer finally. So I wouldn't try to reconstruct the incident here. What I'm trying to do is give some idea of reconstruction of individual shots. He's not reconstructing the whole thing, just a couple of individual shots. Sometimes you can get a suggestion of which one came before the others, but usually that's very difficult to assess. Okay, I'm just talking about what you did here in court yesterday. You said that in your opinion the wound to Jose Menendez's head was the last in the sequence of wounds to him. Is that correct? That appears to be the case, yes. Now, mathematically, can you tell us how that sets a lower limit to the number of possibilities in this case? No, I can't. You also said that you believe that the wounds to his arms and to his leg preceded the wound to his head. Is that correct? Yes. Now, you're not a pathologist, are you? No, I'm not. You're not a doctor? No. You're not an engineer? No. And informing these conclusions regarding the sequence of shots to Jose Menendez and the fact that he was rotating at the time he received these shots, what expertise exactly are you relying on? I'm relying upon reports that were written by pathologists, discussions with pathologists, discussions with Dr. Fackler. I mean, in terms of your own personal background, what expertise do you bring into it which allows you to testify to the position of Jose Menendez at the time he received these various injuries to the body as well as the sequence of shots to his body? I have been in the field of criminalistics for about 30 years, a little over 30 years. I've done examinations of physical evidence that involves blood spatter patterns, the appearance of wounds, the appearance of shotgun blasts, the examination of clothes, as well as images of bodies for that period of time. And I've been involved in it for many years and have taught in that area. Well, your experience in dealing with clothing in crime scenes doesn't help you very much here because you didn't tell us that. In fact, you can't tell us very much from the clothing that it was involved in this case. Well, as a matter of fact, objection, argumentative, overruled. The witness says, as a matter of fact, the fact that I've looked at a lot of clothing told us that you can't tell much, and that is, in fact, useful information. If someone claims that you can tell something from it, and my experience shows that you can't, that's useful information. Mr. Khan says, okay, but the fact that you have expertise in the field of looking at clothing that was involved in a crime scene in this particular case didn't help you very much in determining that Jose Menendez was twirling as these shots were being fired at him. Is that correct? I never suggested that he was twirling, that he was rotating. I suggested that there's some rotational aspect to his movement, but that was based primarily on Dr. Fackler's observations and the appearance of his feet and the fact that the orientation that he must have been in. What I'm asking you is, are you simply telling us something that you already heard from Dr. Fackler, or are you bringing in some particular expertise that goes beyond what we've heard? Objection, compound, sustained. Are you telling us something that is based upon your own particular expertise? I think I'm bringing in the fact of the lack of evidence of blowout from the leg wound to the left of Mr. Menendez while he's seated, The blood spatter pattern, that kind of thing. Okay. And so basically, your experience is really in the area of blood spatter as far as your testimony is concerned here. Objection misstates the testimony and argumentative. Court says it's cross examination overruled. The witness says, pardon me? As I've indicated, it's blood spatter, wound characteristics, patterns of firearms evidence, whether it's rifle, barrel, ammunition, or whether it's shotguns. I've done many, many experiments and tests using various firearms and ammunition to determine such things as firing distance. Do you feel you have as much experience in firearms as another expert called by the defense, Deputy Van Horn? I have different kinds of firearm or different kinds of experience than he does. I probably have in some areas more experience, in some areas less. Do you feel that you have as much experience in identifying wounds as another expert called by the defense, Dr. Fackler? No. Dr. Fackler has much more experience in wound examination. Do you feel that you have as much experience in blood spatter examination as another witness called by the defense, Mr. Linhart? I probably have as much experience as much as he does. I've been doing this for longer than he has and have been involved in blood spatter ever since some of the early work with Paul Kirk in Berkeley. I don't know who that is. Did you run all of your conclusions by Mr. Linhart to see if he agrees with you concerning your rotating of Jose Menendez while the shots were being fired at him? No, I did not. And is there a reason why you didn't discuss that with a blood spatter expert called by the defense in this case? Objection argumentative calls for speculation. Overruled. No, there's no particular reason. I didn't feel any need to. Was it because you reviewed his 93 report and realized after reviewing his report that he said that there are only a number of conclusions that can be reached in this case, and that would cause you to believe that your rotating theory was not one of those conclusions? Objection, argumentative and compound. Sustained. The question is argumentative. Did you review his 93 report? Yes, I did. Why? To see what he had to say. Duh. Okay, and did you feel his opinion was valuable to you? Felt it was valuable, yes. And you didn't think it would be appropriate for you to discuss with him whether he agreed with this rotating theory of Jose Menendez? Objection, argumentative. Overruled. I didn't see any need to. No. And all the other conclusions that you reached concerning Jose Menendez being standing at the time of the shots, you didn't feel that it would be helpful to discuss this with another defense expert called by the defense in this case? Objection, argumentative. Overruled. Witness says, no. But you consulted with some other experts in this case? Yes. How'd you make that determination? Consult with some and not the others. Well, Dr. Fackler's expertise is particularly a special expertise in the area of wound ballistics, and I felt a need for that. That consultation would be useful. But basically, Mr. Linhart and I do very similar things, so he is like a criminalist, like Mr. Linhart. Or firearms. Well, he's firearms, he's blood expert, like he's a criminalist. He knows all of it, all of the little ins and outs. But I'm sure you can't be an expert in all of it. So, I mean, there are areas where I'm sure he's more skilled than Mr. Linhart, and then there's areas where Mr. Linhart's more skilled than him, like he was saying. So, because criminalistics includes the ballistics, the wounds, the crime scene, the blood evidence, the every little thing that can help you put together the scene and put together what happened at the scene. DNA. Is one of the reasons why is because you realized that the sheriff's department was not going to sign up to your theory in this case. Is that correct? Objection, argumentative. The witness says, not at all. Court says, overruled, the answer will stand. The witness says, I'm sorry, because he answered it before the judge could answer. Mr. Khan says, how about Deputy Van Horn? Did you meet with Deputy Van Horn for the purpose of discussing with him your theory about how you can accurately determine the distance from which a shotgun is fired based upon the shotgun spreads. Did I say accurately determined distance? I don't think I said that. But you said that you can give a range. Is that correct? Yes. By so doing, he did precisely what Deputy Van Horn said you cannot do, and that is give an estimate of distance from merely looking at the spread of shotgun spread. Is that correct? Miss Abramson says, objection, argumentative. Rephrase the question, please, says the court. Mr. Khan says, yes. Did you review the testimony of Van Horn? Yes. And was it your understanding from reviewing his testimony that what he said is that you cannot look at a spread of shotgun pellets and give an estimate of the distance from which that shotgun was fired without having the benefit of the actual shotgun to work with for the purpose of duplicating that type of a spread? He said their policy was not to do that, and I think there are legitimate reasons for that, but I felt that that doesn't mean you can't tell anything. Well, why do you think there's legitimate reasons for that policy? Objection, Your Honor. Irrelevant. Sustained. You realize the limitations of looking at a spread of shotgun pellets and giving an accurate distance concerning where that shotgun was at the time it was fired? There's always a problem. Yes. Why is that a problem? Because there are variations with different ammunition and different firearms, and there are differences in targets. And you understood that because of that problem, the sheriff's department will not even give a range. Is that correct? They have a policy of not giving a range. Yes, that's true. And do you feel that that's an arbitrary policy of what's based upon the limitations of science? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. The witness says it depends on how far you're trying to take the evidence. I mean, clearly, there are limitations on the ability to define a distance from any test firings you do. The more precisely you duplicate the conditions, the better the range. But you feel that regardless of the policy of the sheriff's department, you can give a reliable range of at which a shotgun was fired. Is that correct? Yes. Objection. Argumentative. Sustained. The answer will stand. The answer is stricken. Sustained. The answer is stricken. And did you answer from the doctor? Did you understand from Mr. Van Horn's testimony that there is so much variation from gun to gun that you can't even give this general rule, range or rule of thumb? Yes, there's variation from gun to gun, primarily barrel length, and also, I think, to a large extent from the ammunition. And you're saying you disagree with him? You feel that Van Horn is wrong, that you can, in fact, give a reliable range? Is that correct? Objection, argumentative, overruled. I think you can give an estimate of ranges. Yes, these things are not random in the way in the way they produce patterns. If they were, they wouldn't be very valuable to the users. They're designed to do a certain thing, and that is relatively reproducible. So the thing that the bullets do, the way that shotguns work, everything designed about them, they're supposed to be reproducible. You're supposed to be able to reproduce from this distance, that target, this much spread, all of it should be able to be reproduced. You have the same manufactured weapon, same barrel length, same ammunition, and that's going to be better than using a different kind of ammunition and a different gun. Well, did you sit down with Van Horn and tell him that despite his years of experience, he is wrong? He can, in fact, give ranges in which a shotgun was fired without having the gun? No, I did not. Is that because you knew there was no way he was going to sign on board with your theory? Objection calls for speculation. Overruled. I don't know what that was. Sounded, yeah, you heard that too, right? We heard a noise. Ghosts. Okay, don't bark. Dog's now growling because she heard it too. I don't know what that was. Objection calls for speculation. Overruled. You can answer the question. The witness says, no, that's clearly not the reason. Well, can you tell us why you didn't do that with Mr. Van Horn? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. I just didn't feel it was necessary. Yeah, what am I going to do? Call up a colleague and be like, yo, you're wrong. No. Like, what? Why would you do that? I don't know. But anyways, the witness says that it just didn't feel it was necessary. It wasn't necessary to consult with a ballistics expert called by the defense that might be able to buttress your testimony in this case. Objection, argumentative, sustained. Now, you conducted some test firings in this case using a shotgun other than the one that was used in the killings. Is that correct? That's correct. And how many shots did you fire from that gun? 4. 4 shots? Yes. In total? No. Actually, I fired some others. And what are the results of those other tests? I have them here in my briefcase. How many shots did you fire in total? I think 8. And that was your entire experiment in this case, is that correct? I believe so, yes. And you felt that 8 shots alone would be sufficient to give some accurate range at which the shotgun was fired in this particular case. To give some estimate, yes. Are you aware of any published reports of experimentation with shotgun spreads in which the whole experiment consisted of 8 shots? I don't recall any specifically, no. Isn't it true that in regard to experiments that have been done with a firing of shotguns and shotgun spreads, they normally fire a lot more than 8 shots? Dude, you're impeaching your own witness by bringing this out because your dude only did a few shots. Dr. McCarthy only did a few shots. So, yeah. They may. In many cases, you don't have the same ammunition in the case, so you may not have that much to fire. So because you don't have the same matching gun and ammunition, there's not a whole lot of point of doing a ton of firings. Regardless of what type of ammunition, can you point to any study, any published study concerning the spread of shotgun pellets in which only 8 shots were fired? No, I cannot. And wouldn't you agree that what you did in this case was really not very scientific, but it was to just make a point to the jury that you wanted to make to them? Objection, argumentative, overruled. No, I felt that this showed as much as I could show with any number of experiments. I mean, I could have done a lot more and straightened out that curve, made it a little more precise, but it still isn't going to be beyond what I would include in the estimate anyways. Well, but by doing a lot more, you could have made a more convincing case that when you fire a gun repeatedly, you will obtain more or less the same results. Is that correct? Objection, argumentative, sustained as to the form of the question. If you had fired the gun more, don't you think that you would have been able to make a more reliable argument or more convincing argument? That is, if you fire a gun repeatedly, you will obtain the same results. Objection, argumentative, overruled. The more you fire, the more convincing you can be, says the witness. But all you wanted to do was fire your 4 shots, show that to the jury, and make your point. Is that correct? Objection, argumentative, sustained. Did you understand that the testimony of Dr. McCarthy was that he concluded that there is so much variation even by using a single shotgun that you can't get very reliable indicators of distance? Yes. But I'd also seen his results in which he used different ammunition and also both different ammunition of the Fiat brand and different brand ammunition. So he did get a lot of variation, and that was just a foolish experiment, in my view, because I love this guy. It was just foolish. It was a foolish experiment, in my view, because it really didn't test the issue of in any determination of firing distance. So there was no point to that test because he used different ammo, different whatever. There was no real scientific value that came from that. Okay. The variation that he was talking about, his was variation based upon the gun independent of variation among different types of ammunition. Is that correct? That was not. Objection, Your Honor. Misstates the testimony of Dr. McCarthy. Overruled. That was not my reading of what he said. He clearly had fired this gun with the wrong ammunition and different brand ammunition that had nothing to do with attempting to establish a firing distance with a particular gun and ammunition. And you understand that he said that after that experiment, he decided not to even go out and get the right examination, the right ammunition for a particular reason. Is that correct? Because Your Honor, I'm going to object this to hearsay, no foundation. Court says, well, it is hearsay as far as what Dr. McCarthy testified about, so sustained on that ground. Well, did you understand the testimony of Dr. McCarthy to be that he did not go out and obtain additional ammunition, the correct ammunition, because he concluded that just because upon what he observed, there would be such a variation within a single shotgun, the same shotgun, that obtaining the correct ammunition would be pointless at that point. Same objection, Your Honor. Hearsay, no foundation. Court says, well, if the question is, did he hear that, and if he heard it or not, it's irrelevant. If he agrees or disagrees with that, that's a separate issue. So you have to rephrase the question. All right, thank you. Would you agree with Dr. McCarthy's conclusion that it would be pointless for him to obtain the correct type of ammunition because the variation of shotgun spread is so great using the same type of ammunition that obtaining the correct ammunition would have been fruitless? Well, I don't agree with that because based on my experience, it's not true and his opinion was based on some faulty initial experiment. And you could have disproved that theory if you had conducted multiple shots in this case and shown through the experiment that you consistently obtained similar results, couldn't you? Objection, argumentative, overruled. The witness says, yes, I could have. And you didn't do it? That's correct. Now, you said that wadding was missing from the crime scene. Is that correct? I believe so. I'm sorry? I believe so, yes. How much wadding was missing? I don't know. I don't know how many shots were fired. Well, what makes you say wadding was missing? Because I don't think all the wadding or I don't know if I said missing, but was not collected. As I recall, there were a number of plastic wads and the number of fiber wads is different, I think. You said the number of plastic wads and the number of the other type of wads was different? Yes. What do you mean it was different? I don't think the corresponding number of plastic and fiber wads was the same. Well, how many plastic wads were recovered? I don't recall. I'd have to look at my notes. Wasn't it approximately 2 plastic wads? Objection, that misstates the testimony. The court says just a question, overruled. The witness says, I don't recall offhand. You're saying that because the number of plastic wads did not match the number of fiber wads, that therefore not all of the wads were collected. Are we talking about the shot cup wads or all of the plastic wads from both kinds of the ammunition? Well, let's break them down. When you testified yesterday that some of the wadding was missing from the crime scene, what were you referring to? I believe I was referring to wadding from the number 4 buckshot. Okay, and what wadding is fiber or plastic? And that wadding is fiber or plastic? Both. There are 2 separate kinds of wad. And on what basis did you conclude that some of the wadding was missing? I believe I went through and inventoried all of it, and I believe that was the result. And how did you conclude from the inventory that wadding was missing? Well, if it doesn't add up to the number of rounds that were fired, right. That were the number of rounds that were fired? I don't know. Or what were the number of rounds that were fired? And he says, I don't know. Well, then, how do you know that some were missing? It was at least 6 rounds of ammunition were found. It appears that there were more shots fired than that, excluding the birdshot rounds. Ammo wasn't found. I'm assuming they said meaning 6. wads were found or cups were found? Wad cups? I don't know. The brothers took the shell casings. So I don't know what he's talking about here. I'm confused. How many more than 6 were fired? Possibly a couple more, maybe more. When you say possibly a couple more, maybe 8, maybe 9. All right, so you're saying in this case, 8 to 9 number 4 buckshot was fired and 2 rounds of birdshot? Yes. So you would place the total number of shots fired on this case at between 10 to 11. Approximately, yes. It looks like what the evidence indicates. Did the testimony of Fackler or Wecht assist you in that regard? I believe so, yes. Do you see variation between your testimony and theirs in that regard? I don't recall what their specific testimony was. Now, was it your testimony that Kitty Menendez was standing for most of this, for numerous shots to her body? I believe so, yes. And how did you conclude that she was standing for numerous shots to her body? Well, the blood drip pattern on the carpet in front of the sofa, between the coffee table and the sofa, and the shot through the window, the east door. Was that it? Those are the two things that clearly show that she was standing. For numerous shots to the body? Yes. The blood drip pattern and the damage to the window? Yes. Let's take the latter part. How can you tell that from the damage to a window that she was shot while standing during for numerous shots to her body? Your Honor, this is asked and answered yesterday numerous times. Well, it was asked in a different context, overruled. That only establishes one. Okay, that's one shot. Now tell us how you determined from the blood drip pattern on the floor on the carpet that she was standing for numerous shots to her body. I can only say that there's blood drops on a fairly extensive pattern so that she was up for a while. Okay, and let me put up photograph 37 and perhaps you can indicate what is the pattern that you are referring to that causes you to conclude that she was standing for numerous shots to her body. Well, there's a series of blood drops here by the 15, and there's a series that go across here. There's some here. There's basically across the front of the coffee table from the left, from the forwardmost part of the other end. There's a series of apparent drip patterns, as well as the one that goes right here between the couch and the coffee table. And there's one that looks like it's behind the 15. So when you say you're saying that there are some drops near the 15, is that correct? Yes. Then you're saying that there's a series of drops along the coffee table from the closest side to us to the far side. Is that correct? Yes, and some between those two, right in here. Okay, all right, thank you. You may resume your seat. Now, you're saying that based upon those drops, you can conclude that she was standing for numerous shots to her body. Well, at least a couple. At least one to the leg, and at least one to the arm, and possibly others. Okay, so that's what you meant by numerous, that she was standing for at least a couple of shots to her body? Yes. Now, when you say standing, are you saying that she was necessarily standing in an upright position as I am now, or are you saying simply that her leg was raised in some way such that some blood could have dripped to the floor? Her lower leg was vertical at some point. I mean, he's unequivocal in his answer. She was standing. How much more do you want? So that doesn't mean that she was standing? Objection, argumentative. Rephrase the question. Yes. So aren't you saying that perhaps she was lying on her back on the floor, her leg was upright in some way, and blood dripped onto the carpet? No. And why would that not account for the blood drops? Because the blood drops on her, is it her, take a look at her photograph. On her left shoe shows that it didn't just drip down while her leg was vertical. The lower leg was vertical, but she had to be above it, so the blood was dripping down on top of that shoe. Okay, So now you're relying upon the shoe for evidence that she was standing. Is that correct? Before he even answers his question, he's relying on the evidence in its totality, which is what a good forensic anybody should do. A criminologist, forensic, anybody looking at a crime scene, an investigator, a law enforcement officer, a prosecutor. They should all look at the evidence in totality, not just one piece and pick it apart little by little and be like, well, there's blood here, so what does that mean? Isn't that something else? No, because there's blood here and that means this. Like, mm, the state drives me crazy. The way that they just twist and turn everything into different arguments. So you're relying upon shoe evidence now that she was standing. Is that correct? I'm relying on a lot of information here to basically try to put together certain elements of a reconstruction. Not a reconstruction of the whole incident, but individual elements. So little bits and pieces from the scene, he can start to put together individual elements of the crime, not necessarily put it all together in a particular order or sequence, but he can at least start to put some of the pieces together to have some idea of what happened. Because, as all of these experts for the defense have claimed, you cannot reconstruct a crime scene of this complexity and magnitude of the damage that was done to the injuries done to the people, the amount of movements that are possible, infinite number of ways to move the body, and yeah, and both the shooters and the victims could have been moving all in different times, and they were, I'm sure. So you can't reconstruct it, but at least he can do individual elements of it, which is what he's been saying from all along. Okay, now at the moment I'm focusing just on what you told us previously. That is, you relied upon blood drops on the carpet to conclude that she was standing for numerous shots, which you said is now 2 shots. My question to you is, could not her leg in a raised position while she was standing on her back on the floor account for the blood drops to the carpet? I don't believe so because some of those are under where her bleeding leg would have been, and there's bleeding on her leg, which you do see that. But this looks like these came before that. When you say these came before that, which before? The blood droplets in front of the sofa came before what's on the inner thigh of her right leg, which subsequently covers some of those drop areas. All right. So you're saying that there are some blood drops on the carpet which were placed there before her body was lying on that floor? Yes. And the blood drops that you're referring to, aren't they alongside the coffee table? Yes. Objection argumentative. Overruled. And when she was found, showing you 331, wasn't she found close to the sofa? Yes. Wouldn't she have dropped those blood drops along the side of the coffee table while she was lying on her side next to the sofa? I think her leg covers the number of large percentage of those drops. Her leg covers a number of large, that doesn't make sense. Covers a large percentage of those drops. At that point that she was found? Yes. Miss Abramson says, I'm going to object to the photograph misstates the testimony of what her position was at the moment she was found. Court says, overruled. You understand that she was found lying on her side. Is that correct? Yes. Now, did you think that that was a mobile situation or that was a situation in which was a static situation, sorry? Ms. Abramson says, also object to counsel standing next to the witness to question unless there's reason to be there. All right, he's showing him a photograph. Objection overruled. Wow. If she were doing it, he'd be like, yeah, absolutely. Go sit down, Ms. Abramson. Any chance to go yell at her, he would be thrilled about it. Ms. Abramson says, I don't believe so. Mr. Khan says, was this a mobile situation or a static situation? Clearly not static, says the witness. You felt that Kitty Menendez was moving during the time that she was being shot, is that correct? Yes. And so while she was moving, could she have not dropped those blood drops while the side of the coffee table here prior to the testimony that she ended up on her right side in the way that she was found? Yes, I think that's what I said. Okay, and so in that moving situation, can you tell us from what part of her body the blood along the side of the coffee table came from? No, I cannot. Although there is some evidence of her hand being bloody and bleeding on top of the coffee table and smearing across the top of the coffee table. Right. And is there any blood along the side of the coffee table there, referring to the drops on the floor, which could not have been caused by blood from her hand? It's over on the right side, and some of those blood drops go clear over to the left hand of the coffee table. Yes. If she's going to have that from her hand, then she would have to be over where that occurred. Did you rule that out? Did you conclude that Kitty Menendez never had her right hand over that side of the coffee table? I couldn't. I couldn't do that. And because you can't rule that out, you can't conclude that any of those blood drops came from her while she was standing, can you? No. Again, I have the issue of the blood to the left foot. Are you talking about just those blood? I'm just talking about the carpet for a minute. We'll get to the left foot later. On the carpet, can you point to any of those blood drops and say they definitively came from her while she was standing up rather than from her right hand? I can't conclude the possibility of them being from her right hand, no. And because they could have come from her right hand, you can't conclude that she was necessarily standing for any of those shots, can you? Again, putting together all of the elements of the blood spatter, I would say that she would be standing based on that combination of evidence. That she was standing for how many shots? I don't know. It could have been just for one shot. Is that correct? She has to have had she has to have a shot to her leg, which creates some bleeding while she's standing, and she has to have the shot to her arm when she's standing. Why does she have to? You're saying that she is standing after she received the shot to her arm? I'm saying that's when she received the shot to the arm, she was standing. You're talking about the shot that through the bracelet, is that correct? The shot that went through the forearm and the upper arm and then off into the door. Right. That's the one we discussed yesterday. Yes. And you're saying that she was standing then for the shot to the leg, is that correct? She must have had injury to the leg before she was standing, or, I mean, either she was standing when she received the injury to the leg, which I don't think is the case, or she got up to a standing point because of the vertical dropping onto her shoe. All right. Now, let's turn to the vertical dropping on her shoe. But before we turn there, would you agree that any of the blood on the floor could have been caused by bleeding from her hand? I can't exclude that possibility, no. Okay, showing you 331. Now, one of the reasons that you conclude she was standing at the time is because of the blood on her left shoe. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, now just looking at the blood to the left shoe, do you know whether that blood is from Jose Menendez or Kitty Menendez? There's no way, without analyzing it, to determine. Okay, so you make an assumption, is that correct? That's correct. What is the assumption that you chose to make in regard to that shoe? That the blood came from her wounds. Okay, and you make that assumption because you feel it's more likely than not, is that correct? Well, it would be based on the fact that the blood spatter or the blood pattern shows blood that's coming down very close to the leg, parallel to the leg, dropping on the top of the ankle, and it would be very difficult to get Jose Menendez in a position where that blood would be dropping there. Because you're saying that you see what happens to be dripping marks on the ankle here. Is that correct? That's correct. And the tongue of the shoe. Okay. Now, can you tell us why it would be difficult for Jose Menendez to get in a position such that he might have dripped a couple of drops of blood on her ankle? Object to the form of the question, misstates the evidence. Overruled. Clearly, that's more than a couple drops. There's no indication that he was ever adjacent to her. I don't see any evidence of that. Well, didn't you say this was a crime scene where there was an infinite number of possibilities? Pretty much, yes. And because there's an infinite number of possibilities, did you realize that Jose Menendez, or isn't it your opinion that Jose Menendez was shot in the arms and in the leg before he was shot in the head? Yes. And isn't it possible that after receiving those shots, Jose Menendez touched those wounds? Clearly, he did touch some wounds with his arms. And isn't it possible that Jose Menendez, after touching the wounds and sitting in the position in which you say he ended up, extended his right hand over the shoe area of Kitty Menendez and dropped some blood on his shoe? His right hand does not have any injuries. So, because his right hand had no injuries to it, that means his right hand never got any blood on it. Is that correct? No, it got blood from other injuries. Yes. And once it got that blood from the other injuries, is it possible that he extended his right hand over the area to her shoe, dropping some blood on her ankle? You have a fair amount of blood dripping onto her ankle and shoe. You would not get, if somebody touched a wound and held it somewhere, you're not going to get that blood flowing off in that many drips. You don't get that much blood. At the moment we're talking about the ankle. Is it possible he extended his hand over the ankle and dropped some blood onto the ankle? I don't see any evidence that that would be the case. And there's no evidence that that didn't happen. Is that correct? Well, you can't just make crap up, can you? My goodness. I guess you can if you're a prosecutor. Other than the fact that I would not expect, based on my experience with blood flow and pattern and how it transfers, that you wouldn't expect to see that much blood dripping off a hand that's not injured or to a surface. Okay. When you say that much, how much blood do you see on her ankle there? I would say probably 10 or 15 drops, something like that. And you're saying that based upon your experience, you couldn't contemplate Jose Menendez dripping 10 or 15 drops on her ankle. Is that correct? That's correct, unless there was a wound that was bleeding on it, meaning he didn't have a cut there, he wasn't injured there, he shouldn't have been bleeding that much. And transfer blood from touching a wound wasn't going to drop that much blood. Now, is there any reason to conclude that while Kitty Menendez was lying on the floor, she put her own hand, the one that was severely shot up, that is her right hand, somewhere over the area of her ankle and dropped blood from her hand onto her ankle? If she were sitting erect, yes, she could do that. Okay, so because Kitty Menendez could have dripped the blood from her right hand onto her ankle, you can't necessarily conclude that Kitty Menendez was standing up at the time that she was shot, causing blood from that standing position to drip on her ankle, can you? I can't say it is an absolute no. So, what can you say about it? More probable than not? In my opinion, it looks like that supports the idea that she was standing. There are other possibilities. Right, it supports the idea, but are you saying that it's more probable than not, or are you saying that it's more reasonable, or the most reasonable probability, or are you saying this is just one possibility among many? It's one that has some support in the blood pattern that I see. So, one among many? Yes. So, when you testified yesterday that Kitty Menendez was, in your opinion, standing for numerous shots, you're just saying one possibility among many is that Kitty Menendez was standing up for numerous shots, not that she was standing up for numerous shots. Is that correct? Objection, argumentative, overruled. The witness says, that's correct. Now, is it your opinion that after she received some shots, one or more shots while standing up, that you feel to the sofa, or that she, bleh, what did I read? Let me read that again. Is it your opinion that after she received some shots, one or more shots while standing up, that she fell to the sofa rather than the floor? I don't have any idea whether she fell to the floor or the sofa. You don't know whether she was ever on the sofa, is that correct? I know that there's a transfer to the sofa that came from some bloodied area, probably from her. The transfer you're referring to, is that the transfer on the cushion? Yes. Now, do you believe that one possibility among many is that Kitty Menendez, after receiving a shot to the leg, stood up? Yes. And did you look at the photographs of the injury to her, that is the x-rays of her leg? Yes. And you believe that Kitty Menendez, after being shot in the leg and after receiving multiple fractures to the leg, stood up on it? Object to the form of the question, misstates the evidence. Overruled. I can't make a judgment about that. That really is a medical opinion, whether or not she could stand at the time. There's some discussion with Dr. Fackler about that, and he seemed to indicate that, or did indicate that he could have stood on her leg, on her right leg, while her left leg was injured. Well, I'm asking you for your conclusions. Are you saying that Kitty Menendez stood on one or more legs after receiving the multiple fractures to her left leg? I can't say whether she did, because I can't say whether she did before or after receiving the multiple fractures to the leg. The indication is that her there was bleeding down to the left leg, and that suggests that she was injured to the left leg before, and at some time was standing after that. So the drip pattern on the leg was that it dripped downwards based on gravity. So the that would suggest that she was upright when that took place. Well, again, you're still saying that it is your belief that Kitty Menendez stood up after receiving the fractures to the leg. Objection. Misstates his previous answer. Overrule. I believe, based on what Dr. Fackler said, she could, of course, yes. I didn't say she was. I said she could have been. How did you notice, as you were looking at the clothing in this case, that Kitty Menendez didn't have any blood on the cuff of her left pant leg? That's correct. That part's the part that's shown. So, is it your opinion that the blood trickled down from the wound, skipping over the cuff, and then went down her ankle? It did drip off of clothing, and that I see fairly frequently. So it dripped off, which would explain why it's not on the cuff. For it did drip off of clothing, and that I see fairly frequently from a wound and off of clothing. It doesn't necessarily have to flow down up on the pattern. And did you notice that in regard to the wound to Kitty's knee, there's a large part. Oh my God, I can't speak right now. I'm saying words that aren't even on the page. Shut up, brain. Stop doing that. Let me take a breath and start again. Did you notice that in regard to the wound to Kitty's knee, there's a large part of her pants on the left leg, immediately below that left leg injury, which is not saturated with blood? Yes. Well, I'm going to object. Vague, there's more than one left leg injury, or yeah, more than one left leg injury. Court says rephrase the question. Referring to the left leg injury around the area of the knee, which was, are you talking about the lateral injury or the medial injury? Medial injury. Do you notice that beneath that injury there is a large area of her pants of her left leg, which is not saturated with blood? Yes. And did you conclude that the blood from that injury dripped around the side of her leg before coming down to her shoe and ankle? I'm not suggesting that it was that wound at all. I don't know. Well, which wound do you think it was that dripped the blood that you referred to on her ankle and her shoe? I suspect it was more likely the one from well, it could be any part of the wound from the lateral side of her leg. So you're saying it was the lateral wound, the one on her calf. I can't say definitively, but that to me appears to be the most likely. Okay. And then that would be a wound that would be blood that would have saturated the area immediately beneath the wound, but didn't saturate the cuff. Is that correct? Well, you actually have three wounds there. If you take all three of those, the one to the calf, the one to the, Your Honor, with counsel standing there, I can't hear the witness because he's turned away. The court says, it's not because counsel's standing there, it's because the witness isn't speaking loudly enough. Why don't you speak into the microphone? Wow. Judge, just wow. Tell your goddamn prosecutor to go back to the stand or podium where he should be instead of wherever it is that he's standing, because this is now the second, third time Ms. Abramson has had a problem with the prosecutor standing over the witness. The witness says, sorry, Your Honor, thank you. And the judge just makes it like, well, it's the witness's fault. So which wound did you say, in your opinion, dripped the blood onto her shoe? I don't have an opinion as to which wound dripped blood. I'm just saying there's blood that dripped onto her leg. Okay. And then, was it part of your position, or was it your opinion in this case, that she received one or more shots to the head after she finally ended up on the floor? Yes. How many shots? I'm sorry? Yes, the two bird shots, I think, were on the floor. And why do you believe that both bird shots were on the floor? Because of the position of the clothing relative to the wound on the back, and the fact that she ends up there. What is it about the position of the clothing that causes you to conclude that both bird shots were on the floor? The shot to the left shoulder, the clothing is aligned well with the injury, and if it occurred while she was standing and then moved, I would expect it would not be as well aligned. So the damage to the clothing and the person, Mary Menendez, is in alignment with the wound pattern and everything. So that would basically show that it happened on the floor right there where she was found. I believe you said that the shot to her cheek was the last in the sequence of shots. That's my understanding from the pathologist. So it's your position in this case that the shot to the cheek was the last shot to Kitty Menendez, and the shot to the shoulder and behind the left ear was the shot to the last shot. The shot to the left ear was the next to the last shot. Is that correct? That would appear to be the case. Yes. And in that, to to that extent, you agree with Dr. McCarthy that those were the last shots fired at Kitty Menendez. Is that correct? I believe that the pathologist basically established that pretty well. Now, I believe that you said that you found fault with Roger McCarthy's conclusion regarding the entrance and exit wound to the shot that was identified as shot number 7 in Golden's report. That is, the shot to the upper thigh of Kitty Menendez. Is that correct? That's correct. And you believe that Dr. McCarthy got the entrance and the exit to that wound reversed. Is that correct? Yes. And do you believe that Dr. McCarthy relied upon the conclusion of Dr. Golden's regarding the entry and exit for that wound? Yes. Are you aware that in the original 1989 report describing the entrance and exit to that wound, Dr. Golden identifies it in the same way that it is described by Dr. McCarthy? That is, that the entrance is on the front of the leg, the front of the thigh, and the exit is on the back of the thigh. That's correct. And are you aware that even in his 95 supplement, Golden doesn't change that position? Yes, that caused me a great deal of difficulty. It was only with discussion with Dr. Fackler and hearing Dr. Wecht's statement of what Dr. Wecht was saying that I concurred with that. Although I had problems with that from the beginning, but I tended to defer to the pathologist's observations. The problem I had with it was in the character of what was described as the entrance wound. When you have an entrance wound, as you saw on Mr. Menendez's leg, there's either a large hole or it starts separating out into individual pellets which have a fairly predictable diameter and configuration. And this seemed to be too irregular to be either one of those. All right. So it's your understanding that even to this day, the position of the Los Angeles coroner's office, at least according to their official reports, is that the entry part of the wound was on the front and the exit was on the back. Is that correct? I'm going to object to the form of the question as calling for speculation. Sustained. The objection sustained. The answer stricken. There was no answer. um, Mr. Khan says, just based on the 89 report and the 95 supplement, isn't it your understanding that according to the Los Angeles coroner's office, the entrance to the wound is on the front of the leg and the exit is to the back? Same objection, Your Honor. The coroner's office is all right. The objection is that this is a report of one person from the coroner's office. Mr. Khan says, okay. So is it your understanding that Dr. Golden, at least in accordance with his 89 report and his 95 supplement, reflects only in those two reports that the entrance is to the front of the leg and the exit to the back? I'm going to object again, Your Honor. The 95 report doesn't deal with it. Overruled. My understanding is that Dr. Golden's position was that that was the entrance wound on the front of the leg, and he's not changed that position. Do you fault Dr. McCarthy for relying upon the position of the findings of the pathologist who conducted the autopsy in this case regarding the exit and the entrance for that wound? I'm not sure I understand your question. Yes. Do you fault Dr. McCarthy for relying upon the observations of the pathologist who conducted the autopsy that the entrance to the wound was the front of the leg and the exit to the wound was the back of the leg? If he's relying on that judgment and makes his conclusions on that, then it has the weakness built into the assumptions of the conclusion. And you feel that just by looking at that wound, you're able to tell, based upon your experience as a criminalist, that the entry was not to the front, but that the entry was to the back. Is that correct? A combination of that and Dr. Fackler and Dr. Wecht. Now, I believe that you testified that you associate the hole in the French door or one of the holes in one or both of the holes to the French door with a wound that was received in this case. Is that correct? Object to it misstates the testimony. Overruled. I do think that the wound to the east door, the damage to the east door was associated with the wound. The damage to the west door is not so clear. Okay, so let me clarify what we're talking about. Okay, the east door, as you've referred to it, is going to be this door closest to the side. That's correct. And the west door is going to be that door over there. Is that correct? That's correct. Now, you associate the damage to the east door, which there was the smaller of the two holes with the wound. Is that correct? Yes. And is that the injury that you referred to yesterday with the bracelet? Yes. Okay, as far as your testimony in regard to the tufting of the damage or the damage done to the top of the sofa, you associate that damage to the sofa with which defect to the French doors? It appears to line well with it, and I don't have an accurate detail of all of that, and not having seen it or having adequate documentation, it's hard to tell, but it appears to be associated with that, just in terms of alignment. Well, my question is, the damage to the sofa appears to be associated with which hole to the French doors? The west door. All right, to the west door. Yes. That is the one which is to our right, according to that illustration. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay, and when you say that it is associated with that, what is that based upon? Just the terms of the alignment, the position relative to the hole in the door. In other words, there's some evidence of pellets traveling across front to back on the sofa, and those pellets need to go somewhere. Did you notice any angulation to those pellets? Not particularly. They look fairly straight across. Are you able to, when you say that it looks straight across, are you saying that you can see straight angles, or are you saying that you simply saw some damage to the sofa that was that there was no evidence of angulation? I would say the latter. So no evidence of angulation. Right. So you can't tell by looking at the photograph of any angle. Is that correct? There's not a clear association of that, no. Without being able to probe those individual holes, I couldn't do that from a photograph. Okay, it so one of the possibilities in this case is that the damage to the sofa could be associated with the smaller of the two holes to the French doors, that is the one on the east side of the residence. I don't think so because of there's the appearance of the damage to the slats in the door, in the blinds, and also the position of the damage in the door. It does not appear to be coming in at an angle like that. In other words, if it were coming in at that sharp an angle to the east door, you'd see evidence of that on the slats for that blind, and you don't see it. I think a different position for the hole through the glass. Okay, now how wide is that damage to the sofa? Because that sofa or that caused the tufting. I can't tell. It looks like there's no scale in the position that I can see. It looks like it might be several inches across. Now, was it your testimony yesterday that Jose Menendez might have gotten caught in crossfire? Objection, Your Honor. There's no such testimony. Rephrase the question. Yes. Is it your opinion that Jose Menendez might have gotten caught in crossfire? No. I never stated that. You saw no evidence of crossfire in this case? I'm not sure how you want to define crossfire. You obviously, apparently, have two people shooting two shotguns. I don't see any evidence of the trajectories being in opposite directions from what I see here. It covers a range of maybe 90 to 100 and some degrees. Okay, and let me direct your attention to another series of photographs, 304. In regard to Jose Menendez, did you indicate that you observed some blood somewhere near the body of Jose Menendez, which indicated to you that he might have been standing at the time that he was shot? Yes. And what blood were you referring to? That was the blood forward on the arm of the sofa. Okay. Now, in this exhibit, in photograph F, there appears to be two areas circled. Would it be these areas that you're referring to? No, it would be the forward one of the two. Okay, so in photograph G, do you see any blood there? There is the blood that's shown in the photograph, and then also the right out the portion that's been what? What is he saying? There is blood that's shown in this photograph, and then also right out the portion that's been it's actually circled in F, but not in G, right about here. Okay, is there additional blood somewhere down here? I've looked at the photograph on the computer and did not see any evidence of blood out there. Okay, let me ask you to circle if you would take the marker and just make a circle around the blood that you are now referring to. Now, you've indicated that that would suggest to you that he was standing at the time? Yes. And what is the basis for that conclusion? Because it's out forward of where his body was ultimately found, and forward of where it would be if he were seated on the sofa. Okay. Now that blood on the floor could also be blowout from his left leg, couldn't it? No. Why not? Because it's clearly round drops. Looking at these enlarged on the computer, these are round drops dripping down. what you'd see with blowout would be elongated streaks of blood. I'm gonna pause here because my thingy went out. My whatchamacallit, my essential oil diffuser went out. I'm gonna refill it, get it started again, take the dogs out because we need a break, and then we will continue. We're almost done here. We got about 12 more pages left, so hang in there. We're almost done. All right, we're back. Okay. And from looking at that photograph, you can't tell if that blood was the blood of Kitty Menendez or Jose Menendez. Was that correct? There's no way to characterize the blood types from looking at it. Now, did either of the shooters get any blood on them? I have no idea. You can't rule out that that is blood from that was transferred by the shooters either. Is that correct? No, blood that would be transferred to the shooters would not be the kind that would form droplets like that. If they got any on their clothes or on their body, it would tend to stay unless there was some force to remove it, and that's not something that happened. So it would tend to stay on them if there was blood transferred onto them. They wouldn't transfer it back on something else, typically, is what he's saying. Would that depend on how much blood they got on their bodies? You'd have to get an awful lot to have a drip of a drip off like that because it's dripping, like as if it was coming from the individual that's injured, not transferred off of somebody. Right. And if they touched an object into blood and held that object over the sofa for a moment, you can get several drops of blood on the floor. Is that correct? Ms. Amerson says, I'm going to object to this as calling for speculation and improper hypothetical. Court says, overruled. If you had something with a large volume of blood on it and held it over some other area, gravity would pull those droplets off if you have enough blood. This is the witness. Mr. Khan says, now, regarding the smears of Jose Menendez, I believe that you also indicated that you saw in the vicinity of his thighs some blood drops and blood smearing. Is that correct? Yes. Are you saying that any of that blood drops and blood smearing provided evidence that Jose Menendez was standing for any of these shots? Yes. And what evidence let me just ask you, what evidence is that you're referring to? There are some blood drops that you can see you can see the edges of them that are under his right thigh. And when his body is removed, you can see those droplets are there. Okay. Now, if you can go to this board, sorry, if you can go to this board, which is marked 304, and indicate what it is that you're referring to. Yes. Sorry, I went too high. Yes, you can see the edges of some heavy blood stains right here at the edge of this right thigh. Okay. And you can see it down here in C as well. How many drops can you see there? You can only see the edges of what could be. I mean, you don't know they're drops until the body is removed and you can't actually see the size of the drops. Okay. Now, are those drops, thank you. You may return to your seat for a moment. Those drops that you're referring to, are those drops that you're referring to right now could have been caused if Jose Menendez had his leg extended just a little bit to the right and to his right and had dropped some blood from his hand onto the sofa. Is that correct? I'm not sure what you're saying. If his leg was further to the right and he had blood on his hand, it would drop off. Again, we have the problem of the blood dropping off. Once blood is on there in terms of spatter or smears, you tend to get significant dripping because it tends to stay attached unless you have large volumes, and typically you don't see that unless you have a wound that's actually actively bleeding. All we're talking about here is not large volumes, we're just talking about a couple of drops which appear to be alongside his thigh. Is that correct? Right. Objection, argumentative, overruled. And is it possible that Jose Menendez with his right hand touched the blood and with his right leg, extended it slightly over to his right, dropped a couple of drops off his finger onto the sofa? That's a possibility. Okay. And here's a photograph, 331, which depicts the cushion after the body of Jose Menendez was removed from the crime scene, right? That's correct. Let me put this up for the jury to see. Now, in this photograph, along the front of the cushion, there's a long smear. Is that correct? That's correct. And is it your opinion that that was caused by the time that the body was removed? Yes. So you agree that during the removal of the body, that cushion was contaminated somewhat, so you can't tell from looking at that cushion what the condition, what the blood smears consisted of prior to the removal of his body. Is that correct? It does complicate the evaluation of the blood stain, yes. Okay. And this area that you're referring to, which appears to have some blood droppings, you've marked number 2 and you've identified it over here as number 2. Is that correct? Yes. And are you able to see that where the remainder of his right thigh would be in this photograph? There are no additional droppings there. Is that correct? Well, I wouldn't try to. I didn't want to interpret that because it does occur in an area of the blood smearing that occurs during the body removal, but there are indications of other droplets there. Whether those occurred during the removal process or whether they were earlier or not, I cannot tell. Okay. But at least just based upon what we can see from that photograph, we cannot see any other blood droppings in the area, identifiable blood droppings in the area where his thighs were positioned. Is that correct? No, that's not true. I just indicated that I did not choose to interpret them because they are complicated by the subsequent removal contamination, but there are indications there are other drops. Okay, now is there, as you look at that photograph there, do you see evidence of any blowout that might have been caused by the shot to the left leg of Jose Menendez? The problem there is you have a number of things obviously going on about that time, and there is a lot of blood and staining, and there's the victim, Mary Menendez's leg and clothing, which have a very complicated array of material on them. So I can't say specifically all of that would have been the blowout from his leg. Right. And you can't point to anything specific that says there's the blowout. Is that correct? That's correct. And in fact, when you look at this area here, you can see that where as Jose sits on the sofa, you are able to see a little bit of the front of the cushion and a little bit of the back of the cushion or the top of the cushion, in which there's only a few drops of blood. Is that correct? Yes. And the once the body is removed from the cushion, you can see that there is, except for this smear caused by the removal of the body, an area here that is relatively clean. Is that correct? Well, there are a number of drops there. I don't know if I'd call it clean. There are areas where there's no blood drops. That's true. So you don't see any blowout in any of this white area where his thighs had been, do you? I don't see any that I would characterize, although I think Mr. Linhart suggested that possibility. Now, other than those blood drops, which you referred to as being close to his right thigh, do you see any other evidence of these photographs, that is, the blood drop evidence or the blood smearing evidence, that Jose Menendez was necessarily standing at the time that these shots were inflicted? The only other that I would mention, other than you're talking about just the series A, B, C, well, no, I'm talking about any photographs of Jose seated on the sofa. I would say it's a combination of all of these photographs having to do with the lack of the blowout on the left of him seated and also the evidence of the sofa cushion. In addition to that, there's a blood stain. If I may point to it on photograph A, the front of his knee, which is actually dripping down from that area right here, showing that his leg was vertical and blood would be dripping down and flowing down. Okay. Now, let me use another photograph for what you're talking about. I'll put up 302, which shows allows us to see a pool of blood in photographs F and G. There's a pool of blood near the left leg of Jose Menendez. Is that correct? Yes. And that pool of blood would have been caused by blood dripping down from that leg wound. Is that correct? I'm assuming that's what that's from. Yes. And that dripping down from that blood or that pool of blood, there doesn't provide any evidence as to whether he was standing or sitting at the time that the shot was fired, does it? It just shows he was bleeding after he was seated. Okay. You indicated that you observed in the photographs and the police recorded one or more wads that was found on the right thigh of Jose Menendez. Is that correct? Yes. And was it your testimony that it is your belief that these wads entered his shirt, fell out of his shirt, and onto his lap? That could very well be their source. Yes. What would cause you to conclude that? Are you saying that these wads also penetrated the shirt, causing the hole in the shirt? They could have. I didn't say they did, but they could have. But is it your opinion that the wad, once it penetrates the shirt, makes a hole in the shirt, then would come out of the hole and fall on his lap? It either could penetrate, get caught up. It's not unusual for in shootings for bullets components of shot shells to just lose just enough energy that they basically stop very close to the exit wound or in the clothing. It's not unusual to find these falling out of clothing. Okay, but here we're not talking about bullets. We're talking about a fiber wadding. Is that correct? Yes. And you believe that the fiber wadding may have hit his shirt at such efficient force that it would have torn the hole in his shirt, and then, after tearing the hole in his shirt, dropped down on his lap? Probably only in combination with some shot. It does not have that much energy. Is it also your position that the association of the wound to Kitty's breast and the wound to the left elbow of Jose Menendez is more consistent with the victim standing than with the victim sitting? I believe so. Why is that? Because the spread of the breast wound is significantly smaller than the apparent spread of the elbow wound, which would require that it be closer. If they were seated and his arm were to his left, it would put a fairly significant distance between the entry of the elbow and her breast. Did you measure the did you measure the spacing between the projectile defects either on the breast or on the left elbow? Basically, just looking at it in the photographs, you can see that the complication, of course, with the left elbow is that you don't know the position that the wound was received, and that can affect the appearance of that entry wound. And because you don't know the position of the elbow and you don't know how much it flexed, you can't give us any reliable estimate as to what the spread of that shot would have been. Is that correct? It is a problem because of the nature of the elbow and the stretchability of the skin in that area. The spacing between those pellets is substantially different than you see in the entry wound to the left breast, so that suggests a significant distance between the two. I mean, it suggests some distance between the two. Mr. Khan says, I have no further questions. And the court says, okay, we'll take our recess. We'll resume in 20 minutes to the hour. Don't discuss the matter with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it. So we will pick up then with. Oh, it looks like they've got a little bit of discussion going. Oh, no, not really. Redirect examination is where we are going to pick up tomorrow. So, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you and appreciate your feedback in this case. It's very, I mean, it's just a travesty what they did, and the fact that the brothers did not get um, parole, and now we're actually going through this trial and seeing how poorly it was managed, how badly the prosecution tried to distort some of the evidence, and we're still sitting here scratching our heads like, why are these brothers in prison? They're not a threat. And yeah, so reading this is really helpful to see that our um, our support for the brothers needs to be stronger than ever, I think. After 35, 36 years in prison and um, having to deal with uh, the injustices of the courts, the one-sidedness of the courts, it's not fair, and we need to support them more. So, with that being said, please hit that like button if you haven't done so already. Make sure you are subscribed, and we will continue on with Charles Morton tomorrow and complete his testimony and then go on to the boat people. So, I will see you then. Take care. Bye now.